is now being recorded. And let's see if our poll results are in.
The newsletter looks good.
All right, let's go ahead and broadcast these. So you guys should be able to see, this is more important for us, but most of the people heard about the webinar through the newsletter. It's good to know.
Or the website, which is also good to know.
Or the website, yeah. And I do want to start by saying our StarNet website is receiving a lot of traffic right now. This is great, obviously. We want to drive people there. But we're going to be sharing some links from StarNet. And just if it's running a little bit slow today, that's because we've been linked to from a few different articles. So we're getting a lot of traffic. So just be patient, bear with us. And the website is working and everything. It's just kind of getting bombarded right now with traffic. Again, a good problem to have. For your audio problems, if you're not able to hear, which you probably won't be able to hear these instructions, but you can see down at the bottom, you can click on the speaker icon. You can also go to Meeting and run Audio Setup Wizard. You won't need any microphones or anything like that today, just audio. So I'm joined by Dr. Doug Duncan. He's the astronomer and director at the Fiske Planetarium, and he's going to be joining us in just a moment. We're going to do a few reminders and do a hands-on activity before Dr. Duncan presents. Okay, so of course we do want to thank our sponsors, and these sponsors help us put on these awesome webinars for our StarNet project and our NASA at My Library project, the National Science Foundation, NASA, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, and Google. As always, much thanks. And we are going to plug StarNet, of course. Like I said, it's being a little bit overloaded right now, but StarNet is kind of our go-to website for all space science and STEM related activities, resources, newsletters, blogs, forums. It's a way for you to connect with other librarians about what's working. You can go and do an activity. You can leave a review on our STEM activity clearinghouse. So if you look at this image that I have, and you can see the blue button in the very top right of that image, it says Search STEM Activities. That's how to access our STEM activity clearinghouse. And there we've kind of curated these different hands-on activities that are going to be specifically applicable to librarians and used in a library setting. There's a few different collections to choose from, whether you want to do something, an activity based on physics, or of course if you want to do an activity based on the 2017 eclipse, you can find those collections sorted out. And again, a lot of you, it seems like you know already, but our StarNet newsletters go out about once a month or so, and they are filled with great information as well. Yeah, and if you do an activity on the clearinghouse, we would love for you to leave a review and kind of get that Amazon style, being able to sort activities or see what's working for different librarians. So yes, please join StarNet. A few other reminders. Follow us on social media. I think our Facebook page just got over 1,000 people, so let's see if we can get that up even higher. Our Twitter handle is @StarNet_project. And then on September 13th, we'll be having another webinar focusing specifically on different hands-on activities. We're going to be joined by our friends at the Lunar and Planetary Institute. That will be on September 13th. And look for a registration link sometime in the next day or two. We've had to switch over with Adobe, so the registration isn't quite available, but it will be soon. We have another certificate of attendance available for you all after you complete this webinar. So when I close out of Adobe Connect after the webinar, it'll direct you to a SurveyMonkey link, and at the end of that SurveyMonkey link, you will have a certificate of attendance, or you'll be redirected to that. If something goes on and you're not able to access the survey or complete the survey, you can just email me, and I'll send you over a copy of that certificate of attendance. And this is an important note that we just got yesterday, and it's a note about Eclipse Glasses, and this is from the American Astronomical Society. And they just recently updated their safety advice for viewing the eclipse. It is no longer sufficient to look at the logo for the International Organization for Standardization. It's basically a logo saying that your eclipse glasses have been certified and tested in a lab. But unfortunately, because there's such a demand for eclipse glasses, the market's kind of been flooded with some fake and counterfeit eclipse glasses. And they have even counterfeited that specific safety logo on the back. So the only way to make sure that you are getting 100% safe solar eclipse viewing glasses is to buy them from one of the reputable manufacturers that AAS has on their website. I've included the link for this down below. And Greg, if you could put that link in the chat box too. It's eclipse.aas.org/resources/solar-filters. And Greg will get that link in the chat.
Of course, the ones we gave you.
And of course, the ones that, if you got them through StarNet, if you got them through NASA, those are going to be good, safe solar eclipse viewing glasses. So just being really careful here, making sure that everything that, eye safety is the most important thing. All right. So on that note, if you don't have solar eclipse glasses, or let's say that you're working with children and I don't want to say you don't want to trust them, but you're not certain that they can safely use those glasses and keep them on their face. One alternative are these indirect viewing methods. Okay, and a lot of you guys have probably seen these before, and we're going to be talking about pinhole projectors a lot today. And the idea with a pinhole projector is to basically kind of create an image of the sun that is safe for you to directly view that image of the sun, and it is an indirect image of the sun and of those that solar light. So there are multiple ways that you can do it. You can see here we've used a cereal box in one of these. Over that image on the right is a pretty simple way that I'm going to let Doug talk about a little bit later. But if you have two pieces of paper, you can simply poke a hole in one and allow the sun, allow the sun to shine through that pinhole and project onto your second piece of paper. And that's really, really simple. And like I said, I'm going to let Doug talk about that in just a moment. But I want to show you guys a fun way that you could kind of turn this into a pre-eclipse activity and a pre-eclipse craft with your students. So the box that I've chosen for my pinhole projector, it's like a shipping tube. Let's see, I'll scoot back a little bit for you guys. And you can see I've cut off the ends of the shipping tube, right? So it's just kind of, you can see right through it. And you could use any type of box, like I said, just cut off the end so that there is a space right between. And so I've cut off the flaps on this end. On this end, I've cut off the flaps. And the first thing that you want to do is to create an entry for that light, for the sunlight to come and shine through. So I like to use aluminum foil for this. I'm going to grab a piece of that. You can see here some of the pros about pinhole projectors. They're easy to make. You can use really common materials, safe way to indirectly view the eclipse, and you can turn this into a fun activity and turn it into a craft with your students. Okay, so we have the end of our box here. I'm going to attach this aluminum foil towards the end, and I think I have a rubber band. Thank you, Kellyanne. Now you could tape this to the end. Just for time's sake, I'm going to use a rubber band. It's a little bit easier. So you can see I've attached this one side, or I've attached aluminum foil to this one side. Now we want to make an entry port for the sun, right? So I've got a little toothpick here. And we're just going to poke a small hole right in the end. Okay. Now you can do a bigger hole if you'd like. And that's going to project a larger image of the sun. It's just not going to be quite as focused. It's not going to be quite as clear. So we poked our one image. Now we need a screen to project the sun. So the sunlight's going to be coming through this aluminum foil. We need that image. I kind of cheated. I went ahead and cut a little viewer area off right here. Let's see. Let me get this aligned with the camera. So take your scissors. Oops.
It'd be nice if that was on camera. Maybe tilt down a little. Yeah.
So you can see we have one end covered up in aluminum foil. The other end, we have a little kind of a viewing area. And we'll take a piece of paper, attach it to the end right here, and I'll get you guys a better view in just one moment. And we're going to tape that piece of paper down. Now this white paper, basically think of it as like a projection screen. Okay? Thank you, Doug. Okay, and I'll get you guys a better view of this. All right. So here we have our viewing area. Scoot back just a little bit. as the sun projects through this pinhole, there we go, in the top, and then you're going to be able to see the image on this white piece of paper at the end of your tube. Okay, like I said, you can use this with any type of shoebox, any type of cardboard box, a cereal box, anything that is, you know, a little bit longer, and it's going to allow some space for that light image to project. Okay, so again, white sheet of paper, that's our projection screen. We have this little notch cut out so that we can indirectly view the sun image that will be projected there. And then we have our aluminum foil on the end with a tiny little pinhole where the sun is going to come through. I see John asking about a paper towel tube. We haven't tried that, but John, we would love for you to try that and maybe leave a review on the clearinghouse if that works.
If it's long enough, it'll work.
Doug over here, who isn't the expert, by the way, says if it's long enough, it will work. Okay, so yeah, try out some other things. Go to the clearinghouse, leave a review of this activity, and let us know what you tried and what worked. And these are also a fun way. Like I said, if you have a box like this, give your kids some markers, give your kids some crayons, allow them to decorate, to draw something clever. I was going to write I love space or something on here, but they can decorate it as they see fit. All right, so I'm going to get ready to turn things over to Dr. Doug Duncan. Just to give you guys a background on Dr. Doug Duncan, he is an astronomer at the University of Colorado, and there he directs the Fiske Planetarium, which is the most advanced planetarium in the U.S. He was part of a project that first found sunspot cycles on other stars, part of the Hubble Space Telescope staff. You guys can read. I'm not going to read off all of his accomplishments for you, or maybe he'll tell you about some of them. But we're lucky to have him in-house today. He came over from UC Boulder. He's going to be talking a little bit about eclipse safety, some other eclipse things. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to him. We're going to switch to a different screen. And I'll be fielding questions. I come in the chat box as James Harold, even though that is not my name. So if you see something from all caps, James Harold, that is in fact me, Brooks. So without further ado, Dr. Doug Duncan.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm fading in. Okay, well, while the slides are loading, I want to welcome everybody. I am a professional astronomer, but my hobby is actually chasing eclipses of the sun. And as a professional, I study stars like the sun. And as you heard, found sunspot cycles like our star. The sun has 11-year cycles, other stars too. But this is mostly for fun because eclipses of the sun are rare and they're wonderfully involving, and they're a great chance to get as excited as I do when an eclipse of the sun happens. I said I've been chasing them a long time, and that is actually back to my first eclipse, March 7, 1970, in Oaxaca, Mexico. Two friends and I jumped in a VW Bug. We drove 5 days from Pasadena, California to Oaxaca. We saw 3 minutes and 20 seconds of a total eclipse of the sun, and we drove back. As you can tell, I'm still excited about eclipses. So here's the plan for today. Just a little bit on why is an eclipse of the sun like this so rare? What will it look like depending on where you are to view the eclipse? And then a big focus on how to watch safely and how to help others. I had to smile when the chat box said, we've been preparing a year for this. I think I'm going to mention for fun, I've been preparing 4 years. You see, I looked at the charts of the upcoming eclipse 4 years ago. I said, where do I want to be? And I realized, oh my goodness, it goes through Grand Teton and brushes Yellowstone. So I drove all over and I found Jackson Lake Lodge, and I walked in and I said, I want rooms for 300 people for the week of August 20, 2017, 4 years in the future. So they gave me the rooms. That's how it works, if you plan in the future. Okay, why is it so rare? It's been 40 years since a total eclipse came to the continental U.S. The basic reason is the moon is pretty small compared to its distance from the Earth. You never see accurate pictures in a book because there's only this much space in a book. And so they make the Earth and the moon bigger so that you can see them, but it's not to scale. This picture is to scale, and the moon is about 120 moon diameters from the Earth. So you can see, I think, if you look at this, that the shadow of the moon is going to have a relatively hard time hitting the Earth and making an eclipse. So, as I warned you, this is a picture from a book. It's not to scale, but I want you to see that there's two parts to the moon's shadow during an eclipse on August 21st. If you are dead center, the moon will be able to block all of the sun, and that's what's called a total eclipse. The dark part of the shadow is technically called the umbra, but a much, much bigger, less dark area, the penumbra as it's called, if you're standing there, you see part of the sun blocked and not the rest, and that's the partial eclipse, and that's what most people get to see. As rare as it is, so the eclipse, let me go back just for a second. The shadow, of course, is a circle, right? Because the moon is a sphere. And so at any given time, it's a circular area that's in the moon's shadow. But the moon is moving and the Earth is turning, and the net effect of that is that the shadow becomes a stripe and it moves across the Earth. Surprisingly, perhaps, there is a total eclipse of the sun every couple of years, but the Earth is a very big place, and the shadow is only 60 or 100 miles wide. So if you stay in one place, unless you're in Carbondale, Illinois, you're only going to see a total eclipse maybe once every several centuries. But if you're willing to drive, it's better, and if you're willing to travel, somewhere on the Earth every few years there's a total eclipse. So if you get really sucked into this eclipse, there are more coming, just not so many to the US. Okay, so what will it look like? I will emphasize for you that a partial eclipse happens really slowly. All right? Where I'm going to be in Wyoming, it's an hour and 20 minutes for the moon to slowly take a bite out of the sun. And so an hour and 20 minutes is slow. It's not real dramatic, right? It's better than watching paint dry because it's kind of cool to see the sun get this bite taken out of it, but it does happen slowly. So what does that mean? It means you need something to drink. It means you need bathroom breaks. Just very logistical, mundane, but important things like that. Okay? So the partial eclipse happens very, very slowly. And during the time when any of the visible surface of the sun is still visible, that's when you have to protect your eyes. Doesn't matter if you're in Paris in 1911 or in the Galapagos in 1999, where I was, or in the stadium of CU Boulder, where we put 10,000 people to see a partial eclipse in 2012. All of those times, if part of the sun is visible, you need to protect your eyes or make a pinhole projector. Now, here is something very interesting, and it's surprising to a lot of people. In fact, it's surprising to anyone who has not seen a total eclipse. You might think that if it's a 90% eclipse, it's going to get dark, but you'd be wrong. Okay? Even with a very big partial eclipse, it will not get dark. And it's kind of interesting why that happens, so let me explain. If I gave any of you 5 light bulbs, and I put them on a dimmer, and I said, okay, make each successive light bulb brighter and brighter and brighter, so that number 2 is brighter than 1, and number 3 is as much brighter than 2 as 2 is than 1. And then number 4 is brighter than 3 by the same amount, and so on. And if you twist the little brightness control and did that, and I came along with one of my instruments, and I measured how much energy is coming out of those 5 bulbs, you'd be surprised. What looks like an equal increment to your eyes is actually a factor or an exponent. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger very fast. And so if I asked any of you to guess how much brighter it is in the day than in the night. You know, obviously you can see in the day, you can see stars at night. How much difference do you think that is? Well, I know the answer, okay, so I'm going to tell you. The answer is something like 1 billion. All right? Daytime versus nighttime stars, 1 billion times brighter. And so this is maybe the most useful picture that I'm going to show you today. And I'm going to encourage you to help all the people talking about a partial eclipse to change their vocabulary in the following way. All right? Most people will say, oh, look, there's a 95% eclipse where I live. I want you to say, no, that's a 5% of the sun is still visible eclipse. And that, of course, it means the same thing, but it's emphasizing the sun's power. Because, in fact, the sun is 400,000 times brighter than the full moon. And that means, if you do the math here, 5% of the sun is equal to 20,000 full moons. Isn't that amazing? So you could probably appreciate if there were 20,000 full moons in the sky, it would not be that dark. And so even a high percentage partial eclipse does not get as dark as most people expect. The sun is powerful, and even with a few percent of the sun's visible surface still out, you have to protect your eyes if you want to see it. A pinhole camera is a great thing, and you can do it with a cereal box. You can do it with the cardboard tube out of a roll of paper towels. The longer your projection distance, the bigger the image. Okay? So the further apart you hold the cards, or the longer your box or your tube, the bigger the image, but it's still going to be pretty small. All right? If you put your hand out to cover the sun or the moon, you can try this. The moon is getting toward full moon now. And so try this some night in the coming week. You're going to be very surprised if you take your little finger and hold your little finger out at arm's length. It will completely cover the moon or the sun. So the image in the pinhole camera is not big, but it's cool because you get to see more and more and more of the sun being covered by the moon. If you make the hole bigger, you make the image brighter, but not bigger. But unfortunately, you also make it less sharp. So the way that you saw of using a piece of aluminum foil to make a nice, sharp, small hole, that's a great way to do, because you can make a nice hole in aluminum foil just with like a toothpick. Anyway, pinhole cameras are great. You can make one. Nature makes one. Watch this. Well, I'm sorry, that's not nature. That's my friend who's holding out a card, which is the opening card of a hotel room. And it's got all these little holes punched in it, and you can see lots of little eclipses. The natural way to do this is let a tree make hundreds of pinhole camera images on the ground. Isn't that awesome? So those of you in a part of the world with trees, during the eclipse, look underneath, and as the light filters through the leaves of the tree, then you see all these wonderful little eclipses on the ground. It's pretty cool. Even people who are pretty knowledgeable, professional scientists, science writers, who have not seen a total eclipse, are often shocked by how different it is from a partial eclipse. And I realize that many of us, most of us, are on duty eclipse day, and whether your eclipse is total or partial is probably not under your control. But I'm going to spend maybe 5 minutes telling you how surprisingly different and awesome a total eclipse is. And if you're not in the region of totality because you're working and helping the public at your library, well, there are other eclipses coming, and you can chase those maybe, right? Anyway, here's what's going to happen. Here's what did happen in 1878. Wonderful total eclipse in Colorado, where we are, and Wyoming, our neighbors. Thomas Edison was 27 years old, and he came out to see the eclipse. The people out here in Wyoming wanted to know if Thomas Edison was as smart as everyone said he was, and so they took him out rabbit hunting a couple of days before the eclipse. What they didn't tell him was that the rabbit they asked him to shoot out there in the bushes was a stuffed rabbit. Kind of interesting stories in this book. It took a few minutes of shooting before Edison realized that rabbit isn't running. This was the eclipse, the first women's eclipse, because Maria Mitchell, our first great woman astronomer, couldn't get accepted by any of the other expeditions because she was a woman. And so she made her own expedition, which was all women. And they came to Denver and they set up their telescopes and they saw the beautiful chromosphere and corona of the sun. That was in the days before you could really take pictures. All right, let's talk about pictures and let's talk about personal experience. Look at this picture I'm showing you and tell me if that's the Grand Canyon. Okay, it's a trick question. It's a picture of the Grand Canyon. It's not the Grand Canyon, it's just a picture of it. Now, I don't know what percentage of you have seen the Grand Canyon in person. I hope a lot of you have. I know a lot have. When you first see the Grand Canyon, many people are speechless. It's amazing. It's so much better than a picture. And that's true of a total eclipse, okay? We can show you pictures of a total eclipse. Whoops. I'm trying to show you a picture of a total eclipse. And it's nice, but it still is a picture. And let me try with words, and then we're gonna play you a little video recording at a total eclipse. And I hope you can tell from how impressed the people are, and you realize that a picture does not capture anywhere near the magnificence of the real thing. Okay, so here I am in Jackson, Wyoming, where the eclipse is going to be total. And let me tell you just how strange and wonderful and awe-inspiring a total eclipse is. You know from your preparation that that shadow of the moon is going to be racing from Oregon to South Carolina. And it moves a mile in about 2 seconds. But look at those mountains behind me. They're about 10 miles away. And that means those mountains are going to disappear into the moon's shadow 20 seconds before us. So as you're waiting and waiting and waiting, if you're where it's total, and if there's mountains in the distance, be prepared. If they're in the direction of Oregon, where the shadow is coming from, just before you are plunged into darkness, the mountains disappear. That's weird. Another weird thing is that as the last of the sun's visible surface or photosphere disappears and the corona gets ready to appear, all the colors of the landscape change. They become silvery, almost shimmery, maybe a little bit like you were snorkeling or something, but you know you're not underwater, and you know that you're sane and sober, and yet the whole world is changing its colors. That's very, very weird. Sometimes, not always, little shimmers, like the ripples of light on the bottom of a pool, move across bright places in the landscape. Those are called shadow bands. And then suddenly, the total eclipse is there. It's like a diamond. The light is shining through a little valley on the edge of the moon. You can see the edge of the moon here. It's not even. It has mountains. It has valleys. More or less of the light shines through, and that's what you see in a total eclipse. You see the edge of the sun's atmosphere, called the chromosphere, and bright regions of hot gas that look pink in color because they're hydrogen and they're glowing, that are called prominences, and you get to see those with your eyes. And of course, the most magnificent thing, which is awesome, is the corona, the sun's outer atmosphere with beautiful, delicate structure provided by the magnetic fields. That corona, some of that material you can see will blast off into space. It's called the solar wind, and it goes all the way to the Earth. When those particles shooting off the sun that you see during an eclipse, the hot corona, when they reach the Earth, they bombard our atmosphere and they make the northern lights. They do other things. And you can see this with just your eyes if you are where the eclipse is total. And just to reiterate, if even 1% of the sun is still visible, I'm sorry, but it's so bright that the brightness drowns out all of these other effects. So if you happen to be where it's in the total eclipse, learn beforehand from the Google map how long your totality is going to be. Where I am, it'll be 2 minutes and 20 seconds. I want to know when totality is going to end, and I don't want to waste time looking at my watch, so I always make a recording. And it simply says 2 minutes left, 1 minute 50, 1 minute 40, my own voice recorded for as long as totality is, and when the total eclipse starts, I press start on the recording, and then I know how much time that I have. Now, why is that important? Because I want to see a lot of different things all in 2 minutes. So I look up and I see the sun's corona, and I see the prominences, and I see some planets. If I'm in the flat and there's no mountains, if I have a clear view, that shadow that we're going to be in is about 30 miles in radius. A lot of you can see 30 miles off in the distance. If you're in some nice flat place like Nebraska, you can turn 360 degrees, and everywhere you look will be sunrise. Do you realize that? You're in a shadow, but the places you can see off in the distance are in the sunlight. So for the only time in your life, you'll be in the middle of a 360-degree sunrise, but you will be dark. The other thing that I do, because I will be where the eclipse is total, is I will take my binoculars, and during the total eclipse, only during the total eclipse, no other time, I will look at the beautiful corona and prominences of the sun. And I have to tell you that the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life, in nature's, in all of nature, is the corona of the sun during a total eclipse with a pair of binoculars. So I will devote about 1 minute to using my binoculars to watch the corona in the middle of totality, and then I'll start to listen to the sad voice that's saying 30 seconds left, 20 seconds left, and I'll get ready my dark eclipse glasses, and I'll see the beautiful diamond ring as the sun just starts to reappear, and then you have to put the glasses back on. But nobody who's seen a total eclipse ever watches the second half of the partial because they're too busy drinking champagne and celebrating.
And just to reiterate, that is only in totality, right?
So this is only for the people who are where the eclipse is total, and it's only during the total part of the eclipse. And some of you will be lucky enough that that will be true of you. I told you that it's very hard to explain how incredibly beautiful and dramatic a total eclipse is. We have a video here taken at a previous eclipse, and I just told you that the video is not nearly as good as the real thing, but the audio captures the response of people. I have to warn you, the people with me at this particular eclipse were all college students, and a total eclipse looks like the end of the world. And that's why this eclipse video is R-rated for language. All right? If you see something that looks like the end of the world, especially if you're a college student, you say something other than, oh, wow. All right? So if anybody listening in is offended by R-rated language, plug your ears for 1 minute, and all of the rest of us, we can have a lot of fun.
All right. And guys, if you're having any trouble with your internet connection, bandwidth, you're not able to see this video, just shoot me an email afterwards, and I'll send it to you so you can see it. Okay?
Believe the view in here. Oh my fucking god. You will not believe how beautiful this is. Oh, man. I can take a peek at it. Look at all the prominences.
Woo! Okay, it brings back a lot of memories. That is what the total eclipse looks like and feels like. It really does look a lot like the end of the world. It's not just people who freak out during a total eclipse. Animals also kind of freak out. Let's see what the animals do in some of the eclipses in the past. Go ahead, please.
Most amazing things about any total eclipse is that the animals always freak out the same way the people do. People scream and shout and applaud when the total eclipse happens, and the animals do strange things. At one eclipse, we were in Bolivia, and we're all looking at the total eclipse when somebody shouts, "Look down, look down." And we do, and we're surrounded by llamas. I don't know where they came from. When the eclipse was over, they all lined up in a line, and they marched away. At another total eclipse in the Galapagos, we were on a small boat, and 5 minutes before totality, every whale and dolphin in the vicinity, dozens, surfaced and swam back and forth and watched the eclipse with us. 5 minutes after totality, they all swam away, and we never saw them again.
Okay, so I hope I have you psyched up that the response of a total eclipse is very different from a partial eclipse. I have a daughter who has a great description of the total eclipse. She says, "It's scary fun, Dad. You know, it's kind of like getting on a roller coaster at Illich's. You know it's going to scare you, and you know it's going to be fun." So for those who chase a total eclipse, let me point out two very useful resources. There is a nice road atlas with the eclipse track superimposed on it, and that's really useful if the weather happened to be bad where you are, but good east or west of you at this eclipse. You could pull out the road atlas and get up early in the morning and get on the highway and try and drive to some place with clearer skies. I realize, you know, if you're working at home, you don't have that opportunity, but it's maybe worth having this as a reference, letting people know that it's available, because as we've been talking about for months and months, we hope that you've been encouraging people in your community to prepare for the eclipse, but they don't have to stand on your front lawn on eclipse day, because there's not enough room for all of them. So if they're off driving, having the road atlas for the total eclipse is a pretty handy thing to have. And then it's a little late for using this, but there is one Canadian weatherman named Jay Anderson, and his hobby is eclipse weather. And he has a website, and you can go to it, and you can see what your chances are in various parts of the country of having clear skies on eclipse day. So those are some useful resources. If you are having an event, if you've decided, as some people have, to make this a fundraiser, I just wanted to show you what a successful fundraising opportunity an eclipse presents if you have some eclipse glasses that you buy and decide to resell to people. It's a little too late to do that probably now, but let's show you what happened here in Boulder, Colorado, because we prepared ahead.
All right, and I'm going to give it about 5 more seconds to buffer that video. Again, guys, if you're having any bandwidth issues and you can't see the videos, just shoot me an email, and I'll get these sent over to you after the webinar.
Try and get these safe eclipse watching glasses, and they always run out. There is an enormous demand and no supply. It takes the factory months to produce and distribute these. And so the only way that people will be prepared to watch the eclipse safely is if they're ordered in advance.
First, it was very easy. You know, we do our normal procedures. We'll put them on hold for customers. But the volume quickly increased. We had to just tell people that it was first come, first serve. We're limiting 2 per customer because they're going to evaporate. And they did, over and over again.
Sometimes customers would be mad at us. It's like, well, what do you mean you ran out? Why didn't you order more? It's like, well, I thought 2,000 was enough. We never ordered 2,000 of anything, and we sold out. And we ordered 2,000 more, and we sold out. And we ordered 2,000 more.
We had a line in the store from the reception desk, probably going almost to the middle of the store, of about maybe 100 to 150 people waiting and hoping that they would get some Eclipse glasses, the final ones.
It's a you gotta have it thing. It's like Beatles tickets. It's like sandbags in the flood. It's like almost panic mode. Oh, I gotta have them. I gotta have them. Finally, right up until the eclipse, and we sold everything we had. In my 37 years, I can't think of any one product that created this much excitement. It was like, well, where are you going to watch it? You going to a party? You going to the stadium? Yeah, phenomenal.
That's pretty good. You could probably stop it even there. Well, so all of us have done our part. We didn't quite reach 20 million Eclipse glasses distributed, but we got 10% of that, a little more. That's pretty good. This particular hardware store in Boulder, Colorado learned their lesson, and for the upcoming eclipse, they actually ordered 30,000 pairs of Eclipse glasses, and they tell me they're going at 300 per day right now, and that's going to increase a lot as the eclipse gets closer. All right, one other useful thing. If you want to show a group of maybe 10 people or a dozen people the eclipse, the partial eclipse, at any one time, you can use a pair of binoculars as a projector, and it will project a nice big image of an eclipse. And here's a little video demonstrating that. Takes a little while to buffer and load, right?
Yeah, we'll go ahead.
If you have access to a pair of binoculars, you can make an excellent image of the sun. Don't look at the sun, of course, but let the sunlight go through the binoculars and out the eyepieces. Take a piece of white paper, focus the binoculars until the edge of the sun's image is as sharp as can be, and then look, you can see a sunspot and another sunspot. And this is a great way to see an eclipse, a great way to see Venus in transit passing across the sun. This is a lot easier if you can put your binoculars on a tripod like I've done here. A lot of camera stores will sell a little adapter. If you can't put them on a tripod, put them on a table, prop them up with some books. And remember, don't look through. Now, how do you point the binoculars at the sun if you can't look through them? That's easy. Make the shadow of the binoculars as small as possible. And when the binoculars are pointing right toward the sun, there'll be a small round shadow, and when you got the pointing just right, the sun will come out the eyepieces and make a nice image of the sun. If you decide that two images of the sun are a bit confusing, just take a piece of cardboard and block off one half of the binoculars, and then you'll end up with one nice image of the sun.
The hardest thing of that is pointing the binoculars at the sun, and it really works well if you can get an adapter and put your binoculars on a tripod. Some binoculars have a little socket, it's 1/4-20 socket in it for an adapter, and some don't. So it's definitely worth your while to get a pair of binoculars like that and try it, right? Try it a week in advance. The sun's out most days, and you can see if this works for you. If you worry about your binoculars getting hot, you can do one of two things. You can either watch for 5 minutes and show everybody and point them away from the sun for 5 minutes and put them back on. Or if you take a piece of cardboard and make the lens of your binoculars a little smaller. I like to block out one of the two lenses so we only get one image of the sun. It's a little less confusing than two. And because my binoculars are very big, it's perfectly possible to block about half of the lens of the binocular, and then less light comes through, and it doesn't change the picture at all. Okay? So binocular projection is really nice for showing a group of 8 or 10 or 12 people who all cluster around and look at that image that you've projected on a piece of paper. And just like with the pinhole camera, the farther away you hold the piece of paper, the bigger the image gets, except the image you're starting with is 20 times bigger, so you can see it very easily. So those are the tips that I have for you to see the partial eclipse and to see the total eclipse. Here are some of the resources that I talked about, and I'm gearing up to answer your questions. I think the sun is absolutely fascinating, and as was mentioned, I've had the chance to study stars like the sun throughout my career. I also happen to do commentary on public radio. Used to be in Chicago on BEZ Chicago, and now I'm in Colorado. And so I enjoy presenting astronomy, and I have a 5-meeting astronomy course on the website called Coursera. And I hope that you've come across this. Coursera.org presents college courses from leading American universities, and you can take them for free. You can't get a degree for free. You have to pay for degrees and certificates from Coursera. But to take the course is free, and so I have a 5-meeting course all about the sun and how astronomers learn about the sun. It's really fascinating. I didn't have time today to tell you about things like the sun-solar wind causing the northern lights, or how we look at the spectrum of the sun and analyze all the different colors and learn what the sun is made of and how hot it is and things like that. But in the course, you can learn all about that. Some of these videos are on the University of Colorado website at the top. You know the third one. And then the last one, if you have a pair of binoculars and would like to buy a big filter that goes over the front of your binoculars, okay, that would be just for you to use the binoculars to look at the sun. That last website of Daystar Filters is a company that's been around for decades, and it makes very reputable filters, and they sell ones that are made for putting over the front of binoculars. I would not try and take one of the eclipse watching glasses designed for your eyes and try and use those with binoculars. They're not made for that. The binoculars let in more light, and these Daystar filters are just much bigger, and they go over the front of the binoculars, and then you can look and you can see the sunspots and you can see the partial eclipse really well. So those are the suggestions that I came with. We've tried to leave a little bit of time for questions, and so I think now's the time to answer questions.
Yeah, and Doug, actually, I already have a couple of questions that people have asked during that chat. Susan wants to know, she says she is at 99.4% totality, or coverage.
Oh my goodness.
Would you consider
gracious.
that totality, or?
That's really fascinating. I think that at 99.4%, you're going to just start to see a glimmer. You'll certainly get into the realm where everything starts to look weird. You think you're in a dream. There's kind of a silvery, wavery cast over the whole landscape. And then you probably, could you move just a little bit?
A little jog up north, right?
You know, I think actually for you, I'm glad you asked this question, because probably people in your hometown, you know, at your library, the message you should tell them is that it does make a very, very big difference if they drive that little extra drive and get to where the eclipse is total. And I realize you're at your library and you can't do that, but you're giving people information all over the next 3 weeks. And so the common misconception, like I tried to address, is that if you see 99% of the eclipse, you'll see 99% of the show. But that isn't true. Even that last sliver of the sun is going to keep it surprisingly bright, and I'm not sure that even with 99.4% that you will see the beautiful corona. So I think you should be encouraging people to take a drive if they can, and if they can't, then be helping them out at the library. That's what I would say.
Okay. We had another question. I didn't see who this was from, and this person said that on the local news they read a story or saw a story that if you use one of those filters and you hold your smartphone up and you try to film it with your smartphone, that it might fry your smartphone. I know that's not really your expertise, but
it is actually.
okay.
And I've even played around with it. The filter that protects your eye would protect your phone the same way it protects your eye. But two things. One, it's surprisingly tricky to hold that filter in front of where the phone's camera is. Most people don't even know exactly where the camera lens is on the phone. So you got the phone in one hand, you got the filter in the other hand, you're trying to get everything lined up with the sun. Don't do it, okay? Because it'll take you half. It's hard to do. I mean, if you're in the partial eclipse, you can do it. As long as the filter is over the lens of your phone camera, then your phone camera will be safe. The problem is it has a very hard time focusing. It's designed to focus on the landscape, but the sun is at, well, the sun is at infinity. If there was a way to force your phone to be focused at infinity, then you could get a good picture through the filter. What I found in my experimentation is it's tricky. It took me several tries until I could get my phone to focus at infinity and get the right exposure. I actually had to download a $3 or $4 app that allowed me to take manual control over my phone. So if you want to take a nice crescent partial eclipse image, that's the way to do it. You need manual control of your phone. You need to practice, right? You can practice any day between now and August 21st. And that's a good thing to do. And if you get a good orange picture of the sun, the whole sun, then you know things are working. And on eclipse day, you'll be able to get a picture of the crescent sun. So it's tricky, but possible. And you'll need a manual control app almost certainly.
All right, we got two good ones right here. Is there a limit? This is from Eric Zeno. Is there a limit to how long you can look at the sun while wearing eclipse glasses?
You know, because the partial eclipse changes so slowly, it's kind of boring to stand in one place for an hour and 20 minutes, right? So I wouldn't recommend that. As far as we know, these filters are very, very, very effective. But honestly, what I do and what I recommend is look at the sun for 2 or 3 minutes, go do something else, have some lemonade and cookies, come back in 10 minutes, look at the sun for a couple more minutes, and you go, oh, look, it's bigger. It's taken more of a bite out of the sun. Then go have some more lemonade and cookies and come back. That's what I do. You know, so I look every maybe 10 minutes over the course of the hour or so of the partial eclipse.
We have another good question from Diane. Will someone be, I guess she's wondering about the extent of their injuries if they remove their glasses and do look up. So if you look at the...
So it depends on how long you look. You know, I have gotten out of a car, for instance, or come around a corner, and oh, I accidentally looked at the sun. What happens? It's bright, it hurts, and I look away. And I bet that has happened to almost anybody listening in on this webinar. What I have never done in my life is force myself to look at the sun when it hurts. Okay, and I bet if you did that for about a second, you would damage your eyes. I have never encountered in my 35 years in professional astronomy anyone who has done that. Okay, so I think that's kind of the common sense approach to that. Someone asked, if I look through the lens of my camera, what will it be like? Well, if you have a single lens reflex camera, the lens of the camera is a lot like a binocular lens. It's collecting lots of light, and in a single lens reflex, it bounces that off a mirror and out where you can look. And so if you took a camera that's a single lens reflex, pointed at the sun and looked, it would be just like looking at it with binoculars. You would zap your eyes very, very bad. If you wanted to take a picture with your camera, then go to that same website and get the same filter that goes over the front of binoculars and put it over the front of your camera. Set your camera to infinity, and then you can take pictures of the partial eclipse. The total eclipse, very, very, very hard to photograph. Between the prominences, which are pretty bright, and the extended corona, the outer part of which is so delicate across the sky, it's probably 15 f-stops difference, if any of you are photographers. So that's very hard to do. It's hard to track the sun and get the right exposure. I would leave total eclipse photography to the professionals. And I know 66 sites where professional and amateur astronomers are arrayed. It's called the Citizen Cate Project, C-A-T-E. You can Google it. And there are 66 telescopes and special cameras and trained professional and amateurs from Oregon to South Carolina that are all taking pictures and combining them, and you can have that. So I would suggest watching.
All right.
Doug, I don't know if you think of the Mr. Eclipse site, but he's got a pretty nice table that breaks down shutter speed and exposure for different elements during totality.
There is. I have used this website for eclipse suggested exposures. Mm-hmm. The two problems are that was done in the days of film, so it's a little bit different with digital cameras. But the other thing is that the longer exposures that get the corona, when you might want to have a half a second exposure, because the sun is so small, if you are going to do photography, you usually use a telephoto lens. And that makes the sun bigger, and that's great, but it means the turning of the sky, the motion of the sun is magnified. And so if your exposure is even half a second, with a big telephoto lens, it starts to blur. So all these details are why it's a challenge. Now, if you want the partial eclipse, those are very short exposures, okay? Maybe, and it depends on how dark the filter is. So if you really want to take a picture of the partial eclipse, not the total eclipse, because that's too much of a challenge, but for the partial eclipse, buy one of those filters that are designed for going over the binoculars and put them over your camera lens. Put your camera on a tripod, try a lot of practice exposures over the next 3 weeks, and then you'll probably get some nice partial eclipse pictures. Yep.
All right, I want to just address a few of these real quick so we can end on time. Kelly Labrie, you're asking what's the best way to protect, for parents, teachers, youth librarians, to protect children's eyes. As I mentioned, if the kids are so young that you're afraid that they're not going to use the Eclipse glasses correctly, I would recommend one of those indirect viewing methods, like a pinhole projector or like a cheese grater.
You know, if I can jump in, I'm glad you asked that because it triggered, if you go to the University of Colorado website with the 3 videos, including the animals, the other video is frequently asked questions. And the number one most asked question I ever get at an eclipse is there dangerous radiation? And I'm going to give you a very careful answer to that, which I suggest that you repeat, because you'll be asked this probably too. The answer is yes, it's called sunlight. Okay? What's coming from the sun on eclipse day is no different than is what's coming from the sun today. But as we just talked about, you wouldn't look at the sun today, right? If you forced yourself to look at the sun, it would hurt and you would go blind. Well, my point is that when half of the sun is out, or 10% of the sun is out, it's the same. There's enough sunlight to be dangerous, okay? So when it comes to kids, I don't see any problems day to day that kids are going to look up at the sun and hurt their eyes. They just know enough not to do that. If there's a whole bunch of adults that are around and are saying, oh, we're looking at the sun, then if you're saying that in the presence of kids, I think you have the responsibility to look at the kids and see what they're doing and behave appropriately, okay? So when kids are really young, too young to use like Eclipse glasses, I concur with all the other experts, project a little image of the sun. Whether it's with a pinhole projector or with the binoculars. Kids love the binocular projection, and all they're doing is looking at the white piece of paper, and that image of the sun is totally safe. If you are having a pair of binoculars and you're a librarian or you're a teacher like me, it's kind of easy to get distracted because everyone's asking you questions. So when I set up my binoculars and I project the image of the sun for 10 or 12 kids to see, I usually deputize an assistant to watch the kids and make sure that nobody grabs my binoculars and tries to look through them, because that would be very dangerous. I've never had that happen. they're very, very happy to look at that white piece of paper and see the sun and the sunspots. So that works great. But if you do that for a crowd, you all know it's so easy to get answering a question from one of the patrons that you stop paying attention to all the rest. So get yourself a helper if that's what you're going to do.
Yeah. And guys, I see a lot of chatter right now on the chat box asking about live streams. This could be particularly good if it is cloudy, if you're in an area of partial totality hosting an event. The links can be found in the chat box. I also saw a question, I hadn't seen this before, about how you should keep your pets inside during a total eclipse.
Yeah, I'll answer that one. Yeah, I've gotten that one many times over the years. Your pets know enough not to look at the sun. Okay? You may be looking at the sun. They are not going to be copying you. Your dog doesn't look at the sun today, and it isn't going to look at the sun on eclipse day. And you know, even those llamas and the whales, they didn't stare at the sun. They just came up and looked around to see what was going on, and they were fine.
Great stuff, guys. Well, I want to make sure we are doing okay on time, so I think I'm going to go ahead and move along to a few reminders. Get the camera back on me. Luckily, Doug and I are about the same height, so it works out well. And if you do have questions, feel free to shoot me an email afterwards.
Could I say one last thing?
Please.
Sure, because I do feel sorry for people who are on duty where the eclipse is not total. So I was given permission to mention that Dr. Doug chases every total eclipse. And if you get so inspired by this that you want to chase a total eclipse, just shoot me an email. I'll put you on the list. The next eclipse is July 2019. It's just off the coast of Tahiti and runs across the ocean and comes onto land in Chile, in South America, which happens to be where most of the large telescopes that professional astronomers such as myself use. So a trip to see the beautiful, incredible telescopes in Patagonia and Chile might be in the offing, so send an email to Dr. Doug.
All right. It certainly does sound like a nice time. Just a few reminders, guys. Don't forget about that note from the American Astronomical Society about
fake eclipse glasses.
About fake eclipse glasses, and make sure that you do have a reliable set of eclipse glasses from a reliable provider. After I close out of the room, let me close out of the room first before you leave, and it'll send you to a SurveyMonkey link. Please, please, please take the time to fill it out. We want all the feedback we can about how we can improve our webinars for you. This Adobe Connect is a new system, so we're looking for feedback on that as well. After you do the SurveyMonkey link, you will be redirected to a certificate of attendance. If for some reason you're not, just send me an email. I'll shoot you over the certificate for professional development reasons. September 13th, Out of This World activities with the Lunar and Planetary Institute. Our registration should open up for that by the end of the week. I will send you guys all an email to let you know. This webinar, as well as our other webinars, will be recorded and archived on our StarNet Libraries page. From there, it'll get uploaded to YouTube. But that's a good link to follow to find our StarNet Libraries page.
That website is.
And let's see, starnetlibraries.org. Oh, yes, join us on social media, please. Facebook.com/StarLibraries. Twitter is @StarNetProject. And with that, I would like to thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to thank Dr. Duncan for his sheer enthusiasm. I know he's gotten me much more excited about the eclipse, and I was already at a 10, so maybe now I'm at like a 15. Thank you guys so much. Lisa, just as one last note, most of the eclipse glasses are actually sold out right now. So go to those reputable sites and see what you can find, but just know that a lot of them, if you need to be ordering right now.
Or go to McGuckin Hardware in Boulder, Colorado, and they still have 15,000 left.
Yes. And stop by and see us if you come out to Boulder. All right, thanks everybody. Just a reminder, I will be closing out the meeting now. You'll be redirected to the SurveyMonkey link. We hope to see you on September 13th.